An interesting weekend for the Sixers. Friday night, you saw MVP Joel Embiid. On Sunday night, you saw Nick Nurse say, we're not going to let you be the MVP. And Paul Hudrick's here to kind of explain what we saw on Sunday that was different, because a lot of people are saying, hey, no Joel Embiid, he got doubled, they didn't really figure it out. So I saw a lot of – it felt like Brett Brown was coaching the game last night on my timeline. They can't figure out what to do. Oh, they got open looks. They just weren't making them. So were you frustrated with what you saw, Paul, last night from the Sixers and the way they handled Toronto's defense?
I think Doc Rivers kind of hit it on the head. He did say the idea, and there's some truth to it, that there were looks, and they didn't hit them. Every shot Tobias Harris took in that first quarter was wide open. They were all good shots. He just missed them. And then I thought what Doc said, and I think he nailed it when he said, was once they started missing shots, it got them in a funk, and then they kind of got out of the flow of the offense. Because you looked, some of the shot, there was, and I tweeted about it, there was one play specifically where Joel Embiid gets the ball on the block, he gets double teamed. As soon as it happens, Ben Simmons flies to the rim and cuts, which is what 100% what he's supposed to do. It leaves Seth Curry wide open, and he misses a three. So, I mean, there were a lot of little plays like that where I thought the ball movement was good. I thought Joel Embiid read the play well. I thought Ben Simmons was on the right spot of the floor, and guys just didn't make shots. And the way Ben Simmons played, that's what you want to see when they're going to double Joel Embiid. And like you said, when Nick Nurse says, I'm not going to let Joel Embiid beat me, I'm going to double him everywhere on the floor, I'm just not going to let him beat me. It was really encouraging to see Ben Simmons then score 28 points and kind of take that mantle. But the problem is when both of those guys are playing well and the paint is clogged, guys got to hit shots. Seth Curry needs to hit shots. And I thought, again, in the second half, when the shots weren't falling early in the second half, they started to get a little hesitant. They were passing up looks that seemed pretty good. And I thought Toronto just beat them. It was a weird game. It was a funky game. If the results are the same Tuesday night, then I would be a little worried.
Yeah, I guess is that the kind of game that you watch and that your assertion at the end is they don't have enough, not deep enough, not good enough. If Toronto is going to figure out what to do with you there, other teams are going to follow suit, and that showed that you don't have enough. Is that what you maybe take from that, or just a bad shooting night?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent. I mean, I think we can all agree that they look like they needed more after that West Coast trip. It was pretty clear that the bench needed to be upgraded. It's pretty clear they needed a little bit more firepower. And I think, if anything, just that game just exasperated that point. Shake Milton was coming back. He was really cold to start. He did hit 3 threes in the second half and kind of helped them help add to that run in the third quarter they had when they went up by, double digits. And they just couldn't sustain it because they just didn't have they don't have enough. They don't have enough. To me, enough, Daryl Morey did a good job improving this team to get more shooting, to get more spacing. But yes, I think that game, the Toronto game, exasperated the point that they need even more to me at this point. And I think Daryl Morey was also watching that game, and he saw it, and he's not going to sit on his hands.
How do you view that 7+ minute span without a field goal in the fourth quarter? I think it was 2 field goals in 8:48, so not good. But if you look at their fourth quarter efficiency to this point, that there is something there to look at in a positive way. So is this just one of those nights, like Gil was saying?
Yeah, and then also to an extent, bros, I mean, Embiid and Simmons lived at the line too. I mean, that's another factor. And I think that's something that's a really good recipe for them going forward. If both of those guys are getting to the line and hitting them at high rates, that just guys around them just need to hit shots. Guys around them need to just supplement what they're doing, because they're doing all their damage inside and you can't stop them because they're so good. The only way you can stop them is by literally all 5 guys packing the paint. So when that happens, there needs to be a threat on the outside that makes teams not do that. And Nick Nurse, to his credit, saw that and said, okay, well, these are the 2 guys that I know can beat me. So I'm just going to pack the paint and take it away from them. And I think, again, in the fourth quarter, I think it was a manifestation of what you saw throughout the game. And it was guys just missing shots. And then I think that bled into them not running their offense, getting kind of out of a rhythm. And it kind of allowed it was a good strategy by the Raptors. I don't want to take any credit away from them. And Nick Nurse, I think, is a hell of a coach. But I do think it was them maybe, getting inside their own minds once they started missing shots. And it just manifested the way it did, where they didn't score for 8 minutes. So, yeah, I'm not overly concerned about it. But if that's something that continues, if that's a trend that again, it happens again Tuesday night, then I'm worried.
So I know, and we will get your opinion on the report today that they're looking to make major moves. I mean, with an S on the end, could there be multiple moves here? But what are some of the reasons, kind of like a why not, you think that a major move is needed or not needed? I mean, the name that's been thrown out there today was Kyle Lowry, but I'm sure there's others.
Yeah, it's tough because you look at their starting lineup, and their starting lineup's been really good. They've routinely beaten the other team's starting lineups. Even last night they did. It's something they did throughout the West Coast trip. Their starting lineup is very good, and it's beating other teams. I think they had the third among, I can't remember the minutes, but among most 5-man lineups, they're like third in net rating. So it's a very good starting unit. And we've seen what happens when the bench comes in and they just tank leads. You saw what happened last night with Chris Boucher getting hot, and Dwight Howard, really is ill-fitting in that situation to play. I mean, that situation you'd like to maybe bring in another guard you can trust, maybe put Ben Simmons at the 5 and have him kind of be that mobile guy that, so Chris Boucher doesn't hit 5 straight threes or whatever he hit. He was absolutely on fire. So I think, so you kind of have to weigh it. I think there's an argument to be made for that big move because Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, all three of those guys are playing the best basketball of their careers. They're, maybe they don't all make the All-Star team, but they are All-Star level players right now. So do you maybe want to capitalize on that, strike while the iron's hot, go after a Kyle Lowry to kind of just really solidify that thing and just have a really dominant starting 5? Or do you say, okay, well, we have these guys who are playing really well. Our starting 5 is doing really well. Do we just add a guy or two to come off the bench, and not when I say that, just because they are bench players doesn't mean they are bad players. It just means they come off the bench. It doesn't mean they can't be good, impactful players. So do I instead of maybe look for a starting caliber player, do I look for a couple of, pretty big upgrades over what I already have on the bench? So when when the bench comes in, the starters can keep that lead and they're still playing with, upper echelon players. So I think there's an argument to be made either way. I guess it's going to depend on, one, who's available, and then two, what you have to give up. Like, do you want to mortgage everything to be all in on the season? And I think you can make an argument that maybe they should.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get more into Kyle Lowry and some of the other moves, but I want to get your opinion on Isaiah Joe. Is that someone that you think can step in and be one of those pieces to help this team? I know he's raw. Defensively, though, there are some positive moments considering the alternative is Furkan Korkmaz. So do you think that he can be a good piece for this team moving forward to make a push?
I think in the regular season, yes. I do worry about him in the playoffs. And it's not his fault. He's 21 years old. He's a rookie. He's a second-round pick. I would say that they never imagined he was going to have this. Like, this situation wasn't going to occur, and they're in the back of their minds, and they didn't even think of a situation where they were going to turn to Isaiah Joe off their bench. But the reality is, Furkan Korkmaz has really struggled, and when he is not hitting shots, he's a liability on defense. To what you already said, bros. I mean, Isaiah Joe has been, to me, that's been the most pleasant surprise about him. He has played very good defense. Especially, again, when you consider the context of a 21-year-old rookie second-round pick being thrown into this spot. There was a possession in the fourth quarter where Van Vliet tried to drive on him. He shoved Van Vliet down. It was a weird possession where, for some reason, the Raptors kept the ball, but it looked like a travel that was initially called on the floor, and Isaiah Joe forced it. It was good defense. And I think that's the reason why Doc Rivers is kind of – because if I'm kind of simplifying it, I'm looking at it like this. If Furkan Korkmaz isn't going to hit shots and Isaiah Joe maybe is up and down because he's not maybe consistent enough, at least I know I'm going to get good defensive effort from Isaiah Joe. So I'm going to go to him because he's going to play decent defense, and maybe he hits a shot or two and opens up the floor. So right now, I think he is the better option over Furkan Korkmaz. With that said, I still think an upgrade is necessary.
Adam is watching on Facebook, has an interesting point. Want to get your take, Paul. If you were to get a big-name player, do you have to give up too much to get that player, stripping this team of an already thin bench? I mean, if you get Lowry, I guess you have to include Danny Green in that deal to make the money work. And I would assume, just me, if I'm Toronto, I don't want Danny Green, Mike Scott, Furkan Korkmaz, and Ferguson. I want you to give me a younger player. Otherwise, I'll just take Lowry and let his contract expire. So, to me, I guess the question is, if you get a player like Lowry or somebody bigger, do you have to give too much to get them, and then you are turned into almost like a Nets situation.
Well, I think it's just using
With less
Lowry as an
scoring, by the
example.
way. a Nets situation with less firepower.
Sure, right. So let's just take Lowry as an example. You would have to move for the money to work because I'm on the NBA trade machine more than any human alive. I promise you. I just don't tweet out the pictures, the screenshots of the trades I make, but I do them a lot. It would take Danny Green's salary, Mike Scott, Terrence Ferguson, and Tony Bradley. That's the package financially you would have to send to Toronto to make it work. There's maybe some developmental interest in maybe a Tony Bradley or Ferguson, but not much. So it's going to be, if your Sixers are going to get Lowry, it's going to be because they're giving them draft picks. Now, to that question, would they give up too much? Now, it depends on what Toronto wants. Does Toronto want 2 firsts? Yes, that might be too much. If Toronto wants maybe a first and a second, I think you can do that because, listen, you still have the trade exception from the Al Horford deal. So then you're maybe, let's just say, again, for instance, a PJ Tucker, you could fit him under the trade exception. Maybe you're giving up a couple second rounders for him. Then you also still have that taxpayer mid-level exception to get a buyout guy or two. So I don't think, again, just using Lowry as an example, if you don't completely gut your entire future draft arsenal, yes, you still do have pieces that you can still improve the bench, where you could still use that trade exception, you can still use that taxpayer mid-level exception and still improve that bench. So, and then also, Lowry being a better basketball player, going to play more minutes, that helps your depth as well. You can use Kyle Lowry kind of lead your second unit when Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons are off the floor. So it just helps your depth in general. But, and then the other factor is, it's nice to have draft picks because, listen, it doesn't look like the Wizards are going to trade Bradley Beal at the deadline, but that doesn't mean he's not going to be available this offseason. And maybe it would be nice to have those draft picks in case you want to make a push for him this offseason. So it's all about balancing and where you see this team. And again, it's going to factor in who's available and what you have to give up.
All right, busy weekend for the Sixers. Big night from Joel Friday night at 50. What a fun game that was. So much fun to watch. Does it without Ben Simmons in the lineup. And then, of course, Simmons and him reunite yesterday. Simmons has another big game. I mean, it was nice to see Simmons get aggressive. Are we starting to feel that something has changed, something has clicked, something has morphed for Ben Simmons?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche, but I do think the game has slowed down for him. I think he's just seeing things differently and seeing the game differently and seeing where he can attack. The biggest thing I've noticed is at the rim, where I think he's just getting in times past, he plays 100 miles an hour. So I think when he got to the rim, he would even, he's trying to finish at 100 miles an hour. Now I think he's realizing, okay, I am bigger and more athletic than most of the guys that are going to challenge me at the rim. So I'm going to take my time and kind of make a good decision. And I think that's what's allowing him to finish with a little bit more touch around the rim, maybe get to, a certain move or a certain finish that he feels more comfortable with. And of course, I think him hitting free throws at the rate he's been hitting them, that's only going to help his confidence. So now he knows when he gets to the rim, he's either going to finish or he's going to get fouled. And at the rate he's hitting them, he's going to make them. So I think it's all a factor. And I think it's like I've said a million times, he is 24 years old. So it's not crazy to think that he is still growing. He's still ascending. He's getting better. And he's realizing how good he can be. And I think that is the thing I tried to preach throughout like the early going in the season when he was struggling, is that give this guy a little time, because I think he's only scratching the surface offensively. I think he's only going to get better.
Paul Hudrick, at Paul Hudrick on Twitter, 973ESPN.com. Read all his Sixers coverage and check out the Coming In for a Landing podcast. Now, I want to get your opinion on this, all right? CBS Sports asked a question on Twitter. Name an athlete you watched play before they became famous. I'll let you answer here in a second. My answer was Mike Trout, but I watched him play basketball, not baseball. Does that count?
I guess, sure. I mean,
See,
you knew who he was, right?
No. See, his reaction of, I guess, tells me everything I need to know. He's on my page. That's kind of a loophole. He just doesn't care as much as I care.
I think I watched him play football, too. He played football for like a year or so before he gave that up. I think he was like a safety or something, but
he's built like a football
I
player.
definitely watched him play basketball. I definitely seen him play basketball multiple times. but never saw him play baseball. The baseball games are always at 4 o'clock when, we're on the air here. But do you have an athlete that you watched play before they became famous?
It's probably, I don't know if I would call him, listen, he made it to the NBA, so I would consider that pretty famous. But I watched from the bench as DeJuan Wagner tore apart my high school team.
There you go.
He was unbelievable. He was so fun to watch. I was so disappointed. Obviously health kind of cost him his NBA career, but he was.
I just called the game.
I've never seen anything like it.
I just called the game Saturday for his son. How old do I feel?
I know, right?
His son is now playing. He's a sophomore. Crazy. His son is a sophomore.
And actually, another guy too, a former Philly. I played with Andrew Bailey in high school too.
There you go.
How about that? Now these make sense. Yours.
Well, I said I called a game for Karl Anthony Towns when he was in high school, but he was so famous in high school, I don't know that I could say that I saw him play before he was famous. He had already committed to Kentucky by that point. Right?
Yeah, it's a good point. At that time, these basketball players, they're famous when they're 5 because of TikTok.
Right, exactly. All right.
So Wagner was already he was the it guy at that point, even when I was going up against him when he was a junior in high school. So
he's Paul Hudrick. Sixers back in action tomorrow night. They'll play the Raptors again in Tampa. Jason Blevins is actually down there, so more coverage from him on our website, 973ESPN.com. And, of course, Sixers have Tuesday Raptors, Thursday Mavericks, Saturday Cavs, and then we're into the month of March. Can you believe that? They'll play the Pacers. And then I think the schedule has one more game against the Jazz, and they got to put a new schedule out because they don't have a second half of the schedule yet. So we'll have the first half winding down in 2 weeks. Paul Hudrick, you're the man.
I'm doing my best, Mike. Thanks.
And he's doing a great job of doing his best. He is Paul Hudrick. The podcast is coming in for a landing, and he, like all guests appeared, via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.